All right, then. It looks like we are live with episode 24 of Space Rocks Uplink. And we're just about to be joined by our co founder. Mark, how are you doing?
I'm good, Alex. Good to see you again on this rainy autumnal day. Now we're on the other side of the equinox. It all seems all hell's broken loose out here. It's gone from sunny to winter in the space of 3 days.
Indeed. Well, the world's, it seems like they just flick a switch sometimes. It's one of those things. Well, nice to have you back for, I guess, SRU24B, I think would be the correct designation for this. Thanks so much to everyone who is tuning in from all around the world for a second attempt at bringing aboard a true legend of the screen and just one of our favorite characters and one of our favorite shows as well. But first, a bit about us, Mark. I mean, I think we should probably introduce ourselves because not everyone's necessarily aware of what it is we're doing with this whole Space Rocks thing.
Yes, because we do this every week or every couple of weeks, we sort of assume everybody knows. But particularly when we have people like tonight's guest on, hopefully we have people who've come in for the first time. So I'm Mark McCaughrean, and I'm the Senior Advisor for Science and Exploration at the European Space Agency, and as you said very kindly, co-founder of Space Rocks, which is just a year since our last live event that we did in London, September 2019. And of course, we've been doing this stream since, when did we start? April, I think. And this is, as you said, episode 24 and a half. Yeah, so it's just a great way for us at the European Space Agency to do outreach by talking to people from all sorts of fields around space, in space, and sometimes have nothing to do with space whatsoever, but still very interesting people to talk to.
Indeed. Well, I guess it's all about that intersection, which is kind of what brought us together, and how, at least for my bit, Space Rocks came about. It's about that collision between space exploration and the arts, including everything on the screen, everything that comes out of your stereo. I guess it's just an ever-present cultural fixture for so many people. I think it's a unique combination, and I think for so many reasons tonight is really just symbolically the real summation of what Space Rocks is all about. Because I think, well, for many people, Shohreh has had an absolutely astonishing career, but certainly, her current gig with the Expanse has got to be pretty damn cool.
Well, absolutely. If nothing else, you get some amazing clothes to wear and some amazing lines to say, many of which are not safe for work. So or for children. So we'll see how many of those come out this evening. But yeah, pretty uncompromising character in the show, but a very clever one. And I think, we've seen her in other things. She, of course, has been in Star Trek. She's been in X-Men. She's been in voiceovers for various video games. And that's just the science fiction side. Lots and lots of sort of contemporary fiction, contemporary storytelling as well. And we did have the chance last week to speak to her a little bit before the show. And then, of course, for the first couple of minutes, we'll see. I think there's a lot of Avasarala in Shohreh Aghdashloo, I guess, this evening. Maybe not the swearing, but I think the perceptiveness and the wisdom about the world. I think that will come shining through this evening.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and I think it's been said perhaps far more articulately than I could possibly hope to. But I think what makes shows like The Expanse great is because it's about characters. It's about real people. And I think so much sci-fi can get those things wrong, but it wouldn't be that if it wasn't for people like Shohreh who just really bring that show to life in an absolutely astonishing way. Why do you think this show has resonated with so many people?
I think, sometimes shows are of their time. We've everybody knows, or people who've been watching us regularly, we've had several of the actors from Battlestar Galactica on, and that in some ways was representative of its time, to do with the Iran-Iraq war and then the Gulf conflicts. I think The Expanse has come at the right time, in a sense, as we've been looking out into the solar system, the discussion about private space, where, you know, where does the line between ownership in space and the ability to exploit resources? And this is all explored in the books and now the TV series of The Expanse. I think in ways which are, you know, much more compelling than a kind of a utopian view that once we cross 100 kilometers altitude, everybody becomes happy and we just go off and explore the universe. Seems highly unlikely to me. And I think that that's very representative of the times we're living in.
Indeed. I suppose because the future is somewhat disappointing, it's also believable, you know, because I guess that's what great storytelling is. Sometimes it just has to be a bit real. So I guess without further ado, we're going to invite Shohreh in. So
very good.
Let's see where we get to. Okay, a digital birthing process.
Aha.
Okay, here we are. And I believe that I'm just going to unmute you. And then I think we're just about ready to go. We have a good feed. Hello, Shohreh. How are you doing? Are you receiving? Oh, wait, hang on. Sorry, I'm so terribly sorry.
He hasn't unmuted you yet.
Yeah, I think you'll have to.
There you go.
Yourself. There you go. Very good. We'll try that again.
Hello,
Welcome to
hello.
Uplink.
Hi, hi. I'm so happy I'm with you. Do you hear me?
Yes, we do. It's very good.
Oh, good. Perfect.
We are receiving, and you know, and here we are again. What an absolute pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us once again. We're absolutely thrilled to have you here.
Pleasure is mine. Thank you so much.
And we were joking that we hope that Amazon didn't send somebody around to fix your internet again like they did last week, even though we know that wasn't the problem.
Poor Amazon. No, it wasn't the problem. It was the whole area's problem. A couple of homes were affected. Problem is that Calabasas, where I live in Los Angeles, the city decided they didn't want to have the pole for the Wi-Fi. It's in Woodland Hills, so 15 miles away. If anything goes wrong, we're at the mercy of God.
Well, hopefully we'll keep him out of it this week, and he can go and take a break, and we'll just have a good show this week instead.
Absolutely perfection. Thank you. So I'm so happy I'm with you.
Well, the feeling is mutual, and we'll keep our fingers crossed for as long as we have you, okay? Because there is so much to cover off and so many areas we would love to explore. I mean, I think Uplink has kind of worked because we're very pleased to go very off-piste. So there's a lot to talk about. But I mean, I just have to ask, because you've had such a rich and varied career in so many different roles, what makes a great character? What's a great character to be?
Well, I every time I throw a free of charge theater classes, acting classes for young people who do not have access to all these, you know, expensive places to learn acting, first thing I tell them, or I had better say, I ask them is, what is the difference between a bad work, medium work, great work? What is the difference? Details, 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 details. The more details you manage to gather about a character, the better off you are when you're portraying the character. I do make an album for my characters. Every time I'm supposed to play a character, I sit down right here in my studio before my desk, and I keep thinking about my character. Then I bring in the magazines, fashion magazines, and I start my album. I decide that my character has this kind of living room, this kind of bedroom, she wears this perfume, she wears this kind of clothing and stuff. I do remember that while I was doing House of Sand and Fog, our director, Vadim Perelman, came to my trailer and I was going through the album. He said, "What is this?" And I said, "This is what I have made up for my character." And he started going through, and all of a sudden he looked at me and he said, "Burberry, Shohreh, your character wears Burberry?" I said, "Yes." He goes, "Why?" I said, "Because my character is pretty square and she loves Burberry." So that's how. Details.
Mm-hmm. So if we sort of jump to the Expanse, where the character, well, let me ask you bluntly, how much of you is in that character, do you think? I mean, of course, the books existed before the TV show, so there's a certain amount of prefiguring there. But
To be-
so how much would you think that you have been able to influence that character?
And to be honest with you, at this point, I really don't know. I remember two of our writers were sort of having fun on the set, and I said something, and one of them said, "Wow, I did a great job." The other one looked at him and said, "Why are you taking credit for my set?" And then this writer looked at the other one and said, "Did you write this one?" Because of course I wrote this one. So at this point, I honestly don't know how much, but I do know that we have a lot in common. We're both very sort of outspoken. We're both determined in our professions, in our jobs. We're not afraid of problems. We're not afraid of the predators. We're not afraid of, what other leaders may be afraid of, or other people may be afraid of. So along the way, in 5 years, I found more and more how we are so much alike, and why the writers at the first place decided to have me in this show. It was really Mark Osby and who called me and told me about the project. I had met with Mark years ago in Palm Springs, and he was with his friend, writer friend, and they both said, "Well, we're going to have to write for you." 10 years or 8 years later, he calls me and he tells me about the project. So when I'm working on the character, I'm thinking, okay, we have a lot in common, and maybe that's why they asked me to portray this role. Like when they asked me to play a doctor or a professor or a scientist, I totally do understand. My voice can pull that through. I can pull it off. It's one of my assets. So at this point, I really don't know how much of her is in me now, and how much of me has worked her to come to life.
Yeah, because there's so many lines. I guess you could call them eviscerating. I mean, where it's just these are like kind of like nuclear warheads when it comes to dialogue and so on, and the delivery is breathtaking. It's just absolutely hilarious. We actually we put something together on Space Rocks to put your best quotes together, and there were a few of them that were right for the family audience or whatever else. And it's interesting in the context of how you were describing that patchwork that you assemble when you're creating a character with those details. So I was very interested to read that one of the influences for that character was actually Nancy Pelosi. That her demeanor.
It was indeed on season 4 when I started this all. When I sat down for the first time, started thinking about the character and how to bring the character to life. Obviously, female leaders were sort of walking before my eyes. First one was Indira Gandhi. I'm one of her fans, and I still think that India owes her a lot for what she did in India. So it's Indira Gandhi. And then Benazir Bhutto and her guts and her deliverance. And right after that, here comes Hillary Clinton, Nancy Pelosi. I'm thinking of all these female leaders, but most of all, Margaret Thatcher. I was there in the UK. It was my first year of studying political science. I studied political science in the UK. First year. I'm in I was using room and board. I'm in my room and I hear stamping. And I'm thinking, oh my God, there's a revolution in the UK as well. Because I just left the revolution, put it behind, but there is a revolution here. So I opened the door with my little English. I asked people, what's going on? And they say, Margaret Thatcher is now our prime minister. She's going to give her first speech. Come with us. So we all go to the canteen, and Margaret Thatcher starts with this. I've heard the rumors that people call me an Iron Lady. I am an Iron Lady. Tighten your belt. I am going to change Britain for good. That affected me so much. I cannot even tell you. I wanted to study literature, English literature. She changed my mind. I decided to go after political science, international relations, and find out what's going on, because I was really naive in that forte, you know, politics. Back in Iran, I didn't have a chance to study politics. It was a no-no. And parents would tell their children, if you want to live happily ever after, do not even go around politics. Don't have anything to do with politics. So Nancy Pelosi, season 4. Season 4, when Abasarala finally decides to run for an office, because we all know for almost a couple of years, she's been denying to run for an office. If you recall, in the second season, Senator Gillis asks her as to why she's not running for an office. And she says, "Sir, I would like to get shut down." But finally, she notices that, well, she needs to run for office in order to be able to get shut down. But later on, obviously, she finds out that running for an office is even harder than getting the shutdown. So while I was reading my lines, I always, when I work on the Expanse, I always watch the news, but I put it on mute. So I can see the news, I can see the subtitles, you know, with a glance, and then get back to my script. While I was reading that debate scene, I all of a sudden I noticed that, oh, Nancy Pelosi is talking. So I turned the sound on and I started looking at her, and I noticed, oh my God, she has changed so much. She's wearing a beautiful long Max Mara coat, red coat. And then later on when she came on, she was wearing those beautiful big pair of dark glasses with a bob cut. And I thought, that's a good idea. She's going to run for office. She's going to, compete with young people. So she is trying to tell the people of this country that she's still young, enthusiastic, and she can do this. She can take over this job and pull it off brilliantly. So I thought, maybe that's a good idea. Maybe Abasarala should do the same thing. She is competing with a young woman. She needs to look young. Although she's always been blamed by her rival that she's an old method and stuff. But in this one, she should show people that she's still young. But tell you something, a secret. On the set, in the middle of the act, as Abasarala, I wasn't happy with the change. Abasarala wasn't happy with the change.
Yeah.
She was thinking, maybe I should have not changed. Maybe I should have not looked this ridiculous with my hair down. It's the first time that she's put her hair down for a governmental sort of debate. So she's, at the same time, she's having this dilemma, thinking about, maybe I made a mistake. Maybe I should have not done this. Maybe I should have looked the same as I'd always been. It was such an experience. Never had this experience before in my life. But I thought, okay, maybe the character feels like this, but the show must go on. So it doesn't matter. Just do it. Just do it.
I'm struck by the fact that in some sense that started with Margaret Thatcher, because, I went to university roughly the same time, and I had come from the middle of England, which was very conservative. And I'm going to out myself now because that was the environment I grew up in. I voted for her in 1979. But then I immediately after went to Scotland, and Scotland, of course, didn't like Margaret Thatcher one bit. And my politicization about the difference between sort of middle of England and the outskirts grew. But I was very struck by that issue because, of course, one thing she did in changing was lower her voice considerably from the way she had spoken before. And you mentioned that earlier on, that voice, your voice is very characteristic. It carries a huge degree of authority and projection. And not just politically, but as you said, as a scientist or a doctor or something else. So I'm just, is that, it's a sort of an odd question to ask. Is that been at the core of many of your roles because it's such a strong characteristic?
I have a feeling that you're right. Never thought about it this clearly, but I think you're absolutely right. It must be a part of what people are asking for. It's hard to believe that a doctor can have a sort of lower voice. Doctors have a strong voice. When they tell you what you should do and what you should not do, you take it because it's the voice that takes in. So I have a feeling that you're right.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you for mentioning that. Never thought about it before.
Well, I suppose in so many ways, acting and politicking, they share similar stages. I mean, I suppose so much of it is about the projection of power, the perception of power, and those details really matter. I mean, it's one thing to be on the podium and another thing to be behind the scenes, and they're two very different political realms. And I suppose what makes all the political figures that you've mentioned so interesting, in understanding the composite of that character, is that they were all powerful public speakers. Regardless of what the politics were, it's that they could project themselves effectively, and I guess that's so key to leadership, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely. No matter what, if you are, people do not want to follow weak people. I cannot count on a weak person and follow the person. The person who's full of doubts and has not made up his own mind. Where is he taking me? But obviously, I would follow someone who's got a strong voice and is promising me, like what Margaret Thatcher did. And she did it for real. She did it for real. So, absolutely, we follow people who have strong ideas, strong beliefs, and a strong voice, and they support whatever they have, and they're at the disposal of the people. Like my character, Amsarala, who calls herself a public servant. And I just love that every time she says that. When she's scolding Aaron Wright, Secretary Aaron Wright, she literally says that. She says, it's because of us, public servants, who are looking for a bribe at the end of the day. I mean...
So let me pick up on that, because it's absolutely true that projecting a strong direction will bring people behind you and follow you. But let me ask you a very provocative question. Does it matter whether they're right or not? I mean, of course, where we live today, we're seeing demagogues rising, speaking untruths, but speaking them so authoritatively that a fraction of the population will follow them, never mind what. Whereas for us, the scientists and the kind of the evidence-based policy people, there often isn't a definitive answer. The coronavirus epidemic has exposed that. We actually don't know the way out of it yet. And so when people tell us they know the way and follow me and it'll all be great, is that actually a good thing? I wonder how you view that in today's political realm.
Well, I think it's really time that proves to us who's right and who's wrong. If you recall, 45 years ago, almost, a politician in Poland, Lech Walesa, started with the idea of rich socialism. He said, okay, say no to communism, say no to capitalism. Let's go for rich socialism, especially for rich countries. Countries like Scandinavian countries, Canada, Germany, to some extent, they went after his idea. At the very beginning, people called him a betrayer, anti his own country, a liar. That was 45 years ago. Today, he's a hero. So it all depends on the person, what the person is doing, and we need time for it to prove itself to be right or wrong. It's hard, but in this case we really have to go with our instincts, with our hearts. If I do believe Lech Walesa is right, I would definitely support him, no matter what other people are saying.
But isn't it interesting that we've been talking about The Expanse for just about 20 minutes, and we haven't mentioned space travel or anything to do with space once, which, is one of those things that I absolutely love about The Expanse, because it's a believable future, isn't it? As I was saying before you joined with Mark, I was saying, a bit facetiously, the reason why I think it is believable is because it's a little disappointing. It seems that technology has not solved our problems, that we've gone to the stars, but we've taken our problems with us as well. I think that's the thing that sets it apart and makes it so unique, is it almost is like a stage with which to explore, many political issues that we're experiencing today.
Well, you're absolutely right. I always say that Expanse is a geopolitical Shakespearean drama. We were caught in that Shakespearean ingredients of it. But I agree with you. And I have to tell you that there have been many great reviews about this show, not even one bad review. They were all great, awesome. But the one, my favorite one, is by a scientist. The scientist says, he's not a critic, he's a scientist. He says, this is the most accurate version of the future.
Mhm.
Perhaps that's why you and I, when we watch it, we realize that, well, it is possible. If we're not careful enough, if we don't take care of our oceans, of our animals, of our species, obviously, this is how we're going to end.
Yeah.
Let's take this as a warning.
I
Yeah.
think that's a really important point about the show, and it's something we struggle with a little bit when we talk about, where are we going in space? The kind of the utopian vision is that we will cross the 100-kilometer line, and we will erase all of Earth's the baggage, because we will become some kind of, superhuman. We will have evolved beyond the Earth, and I think it's exactly the opposite, because once you move away from the Earth, you lose the things which are free, the air. At least today, the air is still free. You lose the ability at some level to move from place to place. I mean, it's becoming harder with climate change and then migration and people wanting to move around the world. At least historically, you didn't have to show your passport when you crossed a border. But when you go into space, everything will be, it's all about who owns it, who owns the transportation, who owns the water, who owns the air. And for me, at least, that's only going to emphasize the inequalities that we see on the Earth today. And I think that's what's so good about the show, is it doesn't shy away from saying, if anything, it's going to be worse, at least in terms of the conflicts between people. So I just sort of wonder how you see that with respect to, I mean, as the show has iterated, has it reflected the changes we've seen, or is it kind of, it's always been in the minds of the writers?
I have a strong feeling that it has been very effective. But allow me to remind you that one show or one film cannot do all the job. We need more shows and more films in this genre to remind people of their wrongdoings today, and that if even if they start right now, it's a bit too late. That's why they should start taking care of the planets and oceans and for example, we keep hearing these warnings in movies, in animations. One of my favorite is, I'm sure you've seen it. Do you watch animations? Do you watch? Have you ever watched Despicable Me?
But I have kids, yep. So inevitably
Okay,
we've.
so Despicable Me, the second one, the mean gentleman who's living up the tree is selling oxygen in cans. If we're not careful, this is going to happen. And monopolists are going to take over. And we're going to have to buy, we're going to have to be rich to survive, to buy oxygen from this person, to buy water for that, from that person. And the way that it's going, they're saying that soon water is going to be more expensive than milk
Well,
here in this country.
it's
So,
I mean, in your part of the world, you're in California. I mean, where water
yes,
rights are,
yes,
I suppose, like a daily kind of struggle. And I had to ask,
exactly.
what is the sky looking like these days in your part of the world? Because we've all been stunned by some of the images.
Amazing. It looks amazing, especially uh, up until 2 weeks ago. Last 2 weeks, because of the fire in San Francisco, it's a bit gloomy and overcast. It looks like overcast. But up until 2 weeks ago, it was so beautiful. It reminded me of the cartoons I used to watch when I was a kid. The sky was blue, 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 light blue, with clouds like pieces of cottons, hanging off the sky. And at nights, the stars were amazing, thousands of them. For the first time, we could see them. I saw a clip in the internet. A young man is out on the street in the suburb of New York, and a buffalo. Animals now have started coming down to the cities. They feel like uh, sort of not in danger, and they keep walking. I've seen a lot of animals coming down our hill. So this buffalo is out on the street. the kid is shouting, "Ma, call the police." It looks like National Geography. There's a buffalo in our backyard. It's amazing.
Yeah, I've seen
Gorgeous.
one of our colleagues in astronomy, Mike Brown, who's out there in California. He's the famous guy. He's called Pluto Killer because he was the sort of, in a sense, responsible for discovering new objects in the outer solar system, which led us to think, well, is Pluto a planet or is it just one of those objects in the outer solar system? He's been posting pictures of bears in his back garden and just roaming around, having fun with the bear cubs. And he's thinking, for those of us who live in Europe, at least in Western Europe, it's sort of, okay, I've got squirrels in the garden. I'll do with the squirrels. Thank you. That's okay. But bears, do we really? Yeah, a little scary. I wanted to ask you. I wanted to ask you a question though. So, because you obviously you've been in The Expanse, but you've also been in other, big science fiction films, Star Trek, and you've been in X-Men, and you've done some of the games. How did you come to this? Was this something which you've had a lifelong love of, science fiction? Because I know we exchanged information beforehand about some of your favorite films, and I'm sort of curious where that fits into your worldview, having come out of Iran at the time of the revolution. Did science fiction play a role before when you were in Iran, or did it come later on?
It's really interesting. Absolutely, it did. When I was 16, 15 or 16 years old with my brothers, I have three brothers. We watched Flash Gordon in Iran every Friday, 7 to 8. We were all like calling each other, "Sharon, come on. It's going to start in a second." And if you recall, those series were made in Germany. And for us, they were the first science fiction TV series we had ever watched. And we were watching it in awe with our jaw dropped, like, oh, wow, how can they do this? So that was sort of in my subliminal. When the first science fiction, when X-Men came around, and I thought, oh my God, finally I get to play in a science fiction. Well, when we were watching it, I was telling my brothers that one day I'm going to be in a science, one day I'm going to play the role, this role, one day. I'm going to call them now and let them know. And when I call them, one is in the UK, the other one is in San Diego, the third one is in Honolulu. So I'm like, hey guys, I got a role in X-Men. And they're like, no, it's impossible. Yes, I did. Yes, I did. But it's interesting. It must have been, but I wasn't pretty aware of it when I accepted the role because I liked the role. But later on, when I was on the set, all of a sudden I had a déjà vu. Oh, Flash Gordon! Oh my God! Finally, I got to play one. It's interesting.
Well, I mean, one of the things, of course, about science fiction, I suppose we're so conscious of is, to us, it's almost like fables. It's just a blank canvas with which to explore many ideas, many dilemmas, many political scenarios and all that. Although, as a genre, sometimes, it can be overlooked. So obviously, it's music to our ears, to hear that. So I mean, in terms of how The Expanse explores those dramas and so on, do you see parallels between what's happening there and what's happening down here on Earth?
Absolutely. I've always said this is the most, although it is called science fiction, but it's the most realistic piece I've ever been a part of. It is so timely and so relative. It's unbelievable. I do remember once Henry Kissinger said that all politicians are actors and all actors are politicians. So uh, it's so true because you really need to know about politics. No matter what you're portraying, you really need to know about politics and the politics of the day. And when I watch CNN, I watch Fox, I watch BBC, I watch Al Jazeera TV, I watch Euronews to get my real news out of all of them. So for me, it's Expanse is in between the news that I watch every night. Mm. And you beautifully mentioned fables. Yes, fables, folklores, stories from the past, epics, ancient time stories or history. We all get our resources from them, no matter what, because the future has not been seen yet. So in visionary writers like I was so sorry about this. Ever so sorry.
That's okay.
Yes. So future has not been seen yet, but in visionary men or writers like Ty Frank or Daniel Abraham, together James S.A. Corey, when they envision the future like this, and they bring it to us, put it into our face, and tell us what's going to happen if we're not careful, then uh, it feels like, oh my God, these guys wrote these books. They started almost 20 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. But are we still dealing with the same problems in real life, in politics, that these materials that was written 20 years ago, is it still timely? If it is, what a shame.
Yeah. Yeah.
Indeed.
So I'm wondering how, as you said earlier on, you came from Iran at the time of the revolution. You were in the UK, you did a political science degree. You said you were sort of, in some sense, motivated to move in that direction away from English literature by Margaret Thatcher. There's a disconnect. How did you get to acting? How did you get to where you are today then? Because, okay, we said politics and acting are the same thing, but not quite, right? They're not quite the same job.
It's unbelievable. I didn't want to act again. I was a child actor, really. When I started acting, I was 19 years old. When I left acting, I was 26 years old. Already had done great movies in Iran. By the way, one of them, a classic, is going to be shown at the Cannes Film Festival this year. So I was a part of all the classic films in Iran during my time. That's why when this happened in Iran, I thought, oh my God, I was so naive and I was so uneducated, politically speaking. I have to start learning what is happening in the politics in the world. And then I was hoping to get a job at my favorite newspaper, Guardian. So I went to their office. They interviewed me. I told them that I was still studying. I was on my third year. And I told them that I would love to work with them. And they said, well, you have to start from the basement, put the papers together. I said, I don't mind doing everything that you ask me, because I love the Guardian and I want to be a part of the Guardian. And they promised me a job for £80 a week. But I told them that I have to finish my study, because this is not my first language. It's very hard, especially, thick books with political terms. It's a hard one for me. Allow me to finish my study first. I did. And I had told all my Iranian friends that please don't call me. I'm not coming to the parties. I cut my hair very short, very, very short, knowing myself, I didn't want to party. That's why I cut my hair very short and started just studying. When it was finished, when I finished, and I got my BA, I threw a huge party, invited everyone. A dear friend of mine who's a playwright, he came to me and whispered in my ears, sorry, I know you said that we shouldn't bother you while you were studying, but I have written a play with you in mind. Do you mind reading it? That little actress in me woke up and said, why don't you bring it around and let me read it? I read the play. It was a political play. And I thought, oh my God, maybe this way I could be even more helpful to my people, to my birth country, Iran. So I did the play. It was a sold out in the UK. We took it on a tour, sold out on a tour. We brought it to the US, took a tour, sold out. I made $37,000 back then, 35 years ago. And I thought, oh my God, this is what I should do. This is what I should bank on. And our first performance here, the play was called Rainbow. Our first performance here in Los Angeles was at the Horseman Auditorium. It sits 600, 700 people. I was doing my makeup because we didn't have, that much money to bring hair and makeup. I was doing my makeup, and the director, who was also playing the role, he came in and he said, "Oh my God, you know what happened? We're sold out, but hundreds of people out there who wants to see the play, and they pushed so much, they broke the glass, the glass door, and we have to pay for it. And I looked at him and I said, never mind the money, never mind what we have to pay for the glass. This is a city, this is a country that we should live in, where people break the door to come in and watch the play.
Oh, I just love the idea, though, that somehow the Guardian are still waiting for you to turn up for that basement internship. We've got some good friends at the Guardian, journalists. We'll let them know if you want to come over at some point and just do a bit of sorting of the mail in the Guardian basement.
Just put a word for me. So if I write something for them, please take a look at it.
I'm sure they'd be thrilled. I'm sure they would. Absolutely.
Yeah, we know a few people. So, I mean, we've heard so much about how you've constructed characters and your favorite roles, but, you know, I'm kind of curious to turn that on its head. On what basis would you turn down a role? How do you know when a role isn't right for you?
Page 14.
Page 14.
Page 14. I know that whether I want to carry on or not. I read it, but at page 14, I almost know whether I want to do it or not. And I tell you what happens. When it starts, just like when I watch a film, first 5 minutes, I'm waiting for them to build the story for me and then start opening the doors to, you know, to this door, to this room or that room or that room. If the first 5 minutes is wasted and people are coming and going and talking and do not take me anywhere that's substantial, that feels like a plane that I can build my home there, you know, my dreams there. I'm like, oh, okay, they're wasting their time. And what I'm looking for when I start reading a script, meaningful, entertaining, relative, bring about questions, because for me, art is not about answering questions. Art is about bringing about questions, and it's a very invisible difference between the two, and some just don't get it. Yeah, those are basics that I look at when I read the first 14 pages.
I think that's fascinating that you mentioned that that issue of art not being about answering questions, because this is often laid at scientists as well. It's like, on the opposite sense, it's like, oh, you think you know it's just the answers. Tell me what the fact is. Tell me where we are. And actually, most scientists are motivated by the unknown, not necessarily. Yes, it's always nice to discover things. It's always nice to find answers, but generally those answers reveal 10 more new questions. So I think there is an awful lot, as we've experienced with Space Rocks, talking to artists and scientists, you know, suddenly are almost allowed to talk about the unknown and the fact that they don't know everything when they're in an artistic context, because it's people haven't put them on the spot and said, tell me the answer to this. Why is the universe, you know, 13.7 and green? It's like, well, it might be, it might not be, but it's curious. So you had mentioned in some of the things we discussed before of films which touch science fiction, which you haven't been in, some of your favorite films. So let's have a little talk about some of those and why they spoke to you.
Well, my films are the films that I have watched. And
the films that you've watched, some of your favorite films that you have not been in. Yeah.
Well, my first one, as a matter of fact, is a science fiction movie, Odyssey 2001. I did not want to leave the theater after it was finished. I was just sitting there, mesmerized. First, with the cinematography. Second, with the subject matter. Third, with Marlon Brando, the sorcerer. Oh my God. It was so optimistic to me. It was the colors they have used. That light baby blue, and then the darker blue, and then the crystal, and then the white in the background. They were also, the colors were speaking to me as a young woman. Like, there is an uncharted territory where you can live happily ever after at ease. It was unbelievable. For days, I was like, I felt like a feather, you know, in the air. That's how it affected me. I still remember its scenes. Unbelievable. The second one, which affected me a lot, was Annie Hall. Woody Allen.
Yeah.
It wasn't the subject matter, it was her, Diane Keaton, wearing a suit. And I thought, wow, what a perfect idea. Because I'm one of those who always hated to use her gender to get jobs or to be, respectable. Or, for some odd reasons, I never wanted to use my gender. I'd rather be a human being first than being a woman. When she wore that suit, I thought, what a great idea. So I started wearing suits. And at first, I used my father's suits. When I went to Europe, I used to buy my suits from Piero di Munzi. I'm sure you remember. It's very famous in London. Piero di Munzi is European style suits. And they're better for me because they have a short torso. The American designers' jackets have a long torso, but the Europeans have a short torso. So that's what I learned from Annie Hall, and how to be yourself and not to be afraid of who you are. There are so many of them. Oh my God. Lately, I watched Galaxy Quest again. It's interesting. I'm sure you've seen that. It was unbelievable. I'm watching it, and this time I'm watching it as an insider. Because first time when I watched it, I wasn't a part of the Expanse, a TV series that goes on for a long time. But the first time when I watched the movie, I was thinking, oh my God, we have to tell our audience that the movie is about a bunch of actors who've been doing this TV series very much in the same genre as Star Trek or, Expanse. But they've been doing it for such a long time, maybe 10 years. They've done 900 episodes. Most of them are tired. And they'd rather get, they laid off and go home. But one of them is still enthusiastic and follows up all the Comic-Cons and signs all the pictures and stuff. This time I was looking at it as an insight, and I'm thinking, would I be tired of the Expanse one day? Or would I be the gentleman who's still enthusiastic, following up all the events and cons in the world, being happy to be a part of this 900 episodes?
Now, I guess the one thing I've never seen is outtakes from The Expanse. There must be, I mean, you all seem to get on so well together, personally. There must be very funny moments, which, again, Galaxy Quest is a comedy, but that kind of, we just know each other so well. Just,
Yes.
But is it like that on the cast? I mean, of course, you're not always working together all the time, but there's...
Inevitably, if you're all the right people, I should say, inevitably this happens. You turn into a family. Touch wood, we are all the right people for this show. So we're all sort of love each other. And when I say love each other, it's for real. I remember Adam Savage, which I'm sure you're familiar with. Yeah. He was going to visit our set. And when he saw me at the Comic-Con, San Diego Comic-Con, he said, Shohreh, tell me about the relationships between you guys at the set. And how's the set? Is it cold? Is it warm? And I started, oh my God, Adam, we love each other. We're a family. I'm their mother. Those are my children. Blah, blah. So he goes, okay, thank you. Okay, sorry, thank you. A year later, he comes to visit the set. I wasn't working that day, but I happened to have a fitting on that day. He makes sure that he finds me and he tells me, Shohreh, you were absolutely right. You love one another. Yeah. This is the most friendliest set I've ever seen. And I with all honesty, it comes from the top. Every time I start working with a crew, if they're unhappy, I know where it comes from. It comes from the top, the production. Our production is great, has been very faithful, loyal to us, never left us alone. The crew, we're all like a family. I have a behind the set clip of season 5, which I'm going to show when season 5 starts airing. But then you would see what kind of a friendly set it is. It is the first day.
You're teasing us now. That's terrible. That's a terrible thing to do.
That I can do. That I'm able to do. I can tease.
I wanted, and this is a bit of a personal indulgence because it's just one of my favorite films, Galaxy Quest, and I get chills every time I hear that, you know, we'll never give up, never surrender. But it's also an incredibly astute and funny observation of fan culture and sci-fi fandom specifically. I wondered if, in stepping into your first sci-fi roles, were you prepared for the world that exists around these kinds of shows and movies?
I
Because I
had
mean, yeah.
no idea. I had no idea, to be honest with you, gentlemen. I had no idea. Had I not been a part of the Expanse, I would have never experienced what fans can do for you as an actor and for the show. When the show was cancelled, well, I am the oldest one of them all. I accepted it right away. I'm like, okay, life is a chapter to chapter. When this chapter is closed, the other chapter will open. Especially when, for the last time, I talked to Stephen Holden, whom I love and adore, with his gentle voice, he said, "It is what it is, Shohreh, you know." I said, "Yes, I understand." Youngsters were unhappy, but I thought, okay, I have to accept serendipity. That's it. All of a sudden, I received a picture of a plane carrying the message, "Save the Expanse." What is this? I called one of our colleagues and I said, "I know we're not doing this. Who's doing this?" He goes, "Fans are doing this. They've put pennies and dollars together, send the balloon or the plane up with a message, and they send it to the Amazon's headquarters. It's now going around Amazon's headquarters." Fans can do that?
Yeah.
Yes, of course they can do that. They literally brought the show back. My take on this is that Mr. Bezos was sitting in his office at the top of the skyscraper of the Amazon's headquarters. He sees the message and he goes, "What? This show is going to cancel? No, 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 no. I want to see the rest of the story. Hello, Alcon."
But you know, picking on what Alex says, of course, sometimes we you know, this is where we met the first time a year ago, of course, in Germany at a convention, and you know, being a speaker talking about science, people are, you know, they get it. You're talking about what you go out with your spacecraft. Of course, you know, the actors get put on the spot to be drawing the line between who you really are and who they want you to be. Now, I think in Germany, actually, it's a very respectful crowd. I mean, they get it. I mean, they like to dress up, but they get that this is a show. But you must have experienced it sometimes when they just get very confused about who you actually are and want to know, why did you do that in series 3, in episode 4, at minute 7, and you've completely forgotten it, but they remember every detail. How do you interface with that? Because sometimes it must get quite intense.
Well, it does, but it's interesting. In my case, they would more like to know where I'm coming from, how I got this job. Usually they're young actors. But one experience was really funny. San Diego Comic-Con, first day, never had been in San Diego Comic-Con before. I come down, I go on the street to buy a cup of coffee, and all of a sudden people are like, "Expanse!" Hundreds of them. I'm like, what? One at a time, please. I would love to talk to you. You like Expanse? Thank you so much. It was, I literally couldn't walk. So I went back to the hotel and I waited for a second and I thought, okay, sorry, learn your lessons. You need to talk to these people. They are called fans. They're the ones who watch your show. So went back on the street again, and this time people were asking me questions and I was answering their questions, and then the 2 young men came. They were like, "Can we ask a question?" I'm like, "By all means." "What moisturizer do you use?" Like, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God." And I said, "Well, I told, why are you asking this?" And they said, "Because you haven't changed for 40 years.
Oh, brilliant.
Well, speaking of the fans, I think we should probably bring in some of the people who are watching tonight. You know, and it's inevitable that people they will conflate you and the characters that you play. And I think a great question. Tickled by that. What,
Love
a great question that's come in from Jeff Smith. As the leader of the world, what do you think that Aghdashloo would say to today's leaders?
I wish you wisdom, consciousness, and a golden heart where you feel people, not just using them as commodities. Mm-hmm. Come together. Eventually, the whole world, people of the world, are going to live next to one another. Get used to it. Make people ready for it. Do not rule and divide. That was 100 years ago. Today, the same method or law won't work. Divide and rule. Mm-hmm. Don't do it. If you divide, it will have a huge backlash on you.
Yeah, for me, that touches a chord, because, of course, the difference between 100 years ago and today is that the world is very vulnerable. You just can't go somewhere else. As you mentioned to me earlier as well, you're passionate about the planet and making sure that, we see the bigger picture here. So, yeah, that's it's a lovely message.
Will you be our leader?
It's not too late to run for politics. I mean, it's never too late to run for politics.
This way is better. This way is more effective.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Than turning into a politician.
Yeah.
People may not believe me, as they sometimes they do not believe Aghdashloo when she says she's a public servant. Mm.
Fair enough. Well, we have a few more questions coming in, and some really lovely, thoughtful ones. Just with someone who's had such a range of experiences. Is there a lesson that you would like to share, especially with some of the really young people who might be watching today? What have you learned over the years that you would really like to impart to some of the youngest viewers that we have today?
For our youngest viewers, I should say, you would not become successful until you've been rejected at least once. Had I not been rejected at the first place, I would have not become successful. I do remember I went for an audition, and here in the US 33 years ago for a TV series. As soon as I entered the room, the casting director very rudely said, "Oh no, you are too beautiful for this role. We are looking for a downtrodden Middle Eastern woman to play this role. Go home." I thought, "Excuse me, nice to meet you," and I left. Yeah. And where I am today is because of her. I wanted to prove to her that she was so wrong. I bet you every time she sees me on the silver screen or on television, she's like, "Oh, what a mistake. I should have picked her up."
We were talking with my family last night about that with respect to, strangely enough, with respect to J.K. Rowling and the Harry Potter books, of course, which were rejected endlessly. And as my daughter said, imagine being the person that just sort of sat there and said, "No, not publishing that." How you live with that, I have no idea. But yeah.
Yeah.
So, some really, really great questions coming in. Ivan would like to know, and I would, no, actually, sorry, Jasmine does, sorry. Obviously acting doesn't happen in a vacuum, so what other actors have you enjoyed playing opposite? Who have you admired? Who have you loved working with because of the chemistry that comes when you're working with other great actors?
It's incredible. I love this question. Whoever brought about this question must be either an actor or very familiar with acting work. He's right. Acting on its own does not mean anything. And that's why I'm so surprised every time an actor dash in with his entourage and start acting. Acting is about interacting. If interacting does not happen, then your acting is no good. There's no use for it. So on this show, I have to say, all of them, starting from Sean Doyle, great partner, who portrayed Secretary Ehrenreich, first 3 seasons. Love working with Steve Holden. Amazing, amazing gentleman to work with. Dominique, on the other hand, so interactive. So is Frankie and Kochar, my assistant, the gentleman who played Kochar. It was unbelievable. Day one, we started interacting rather than acting. And when I start, first, second, I know if the actor is into interacting, I would start working with the actor. If the actor is into acting up himself, then I would just imagine that he is interacting with me. I would substitute him for someone else whom I like, and then I would start interacting with him.
That's a great question. Who is your go-to person to substitute for an actor that's not interacting? I mean, is there a kind of fantasy actor that you would bring into picture there?
I was so sorry to say that it's what's going on in Iran and the people who are pressuring Iranian people. It's the members of the government. Okay, you know my secret now.
Okay.
There's a scene in The Stoning. I'm sorry, after I played the scene, the director came to me and said, "Wow, it felt so real." And at the end of the scene, I give someone a slap hard. He came to me and he said, "Wow, where did it come from?" It was even I was watching it, but I knew it was not real, but I was taken by it. Who did you substitute him with? And I said, from the government. From the government. And he goes, "Oh my God, you did an amazing job. Keep on doing it. Keep on doing it."
Absolutely.
Oh dear.
Well, I mean, there's so much to talk about. We have so many thoughts, and I do think a lot of people, are thinking, like me. I mean, it's just because you are so, in many ways, many of the characters that you play. I mean, it's a composite, and so it's easy to kind of confuse. But I wonder when you kind of take that role off, what's the atmosphere like? When you aren't acting with the other actors of The Expanse, what's the atmosphere like on set? Because I mean, there's so many intense scenes, there's so many intense exchanges, and so on. Is it jovial? Is it exhausting? I mean, what is the vibe when the camera?
It's interesting. I was watching an interview with the Coen brothers, and they were asked what makes a film the best film of the year, and they said X Factor. There's nothing that you can really pinpoint because of this, because it's the X factor. When, in my interpretation, when stars get aligned for you to shine, it's such a calm, peaceful set you would not believe. When you come in, you feel like nobody's working, but everybody is working hand in hand without making a hoopla out of what they're doing. Oh, I'm doing this now. No. It's no show off. We don't tell and show. We do. And the crew is amazing. It's such a calm set. I mean, every actor would give an arm and a leg to work on such a honestly, it's amazing. We're blessed. We're blessed, really.
So let me jump in with a question. I know there's more there, and I know that we have a kind of a cutoff in a few minutes' time as well, because you have another interview to do. But I'm sort of intrigued because you've had such a multifaceted life, both in terms of where you lived and the people you've worked with and the worlds you've been in. If you take all of those away and say, what one thing would you want to do? Which other world that you've seen? We've sort of said no to politics, because that's sort of, it's nice to do politics from the outside, maybe not from the inside. You've done acting, of course, and you've done the political science. What other things? I mean, do you have an ambition to, I don't know, fly a balloon through the sky, or dive to the deepest depths in the ocean, or to become a lawyer? Or I don't want to project. I'm just sort of curious, because it strikes me that there's so many interests that you have. You must have those passions elsewhere.
Absolutely, I do have a couple of things in my bucket list, but Rather than going to the moon, I would love to build schools in remote areas of Iran and Jordan, where we filmed Stoning of Soraya in a village called Dana. I'm dying to do that, and I've been working on it, and I'm getting closer to my dreams now.
That's
That
great.
is,
Yeah,
that is really wonderful to hear, and I suppose very much in that vein, of of that role. Mela has asked a really great question, saying, when you're finished with the role, do you ever find yourself actually changed by roles? I mean, obviously you create these characters, but do they ever actually mold you once you've exited the role?
absolutely. You either learn uh, how to do it, or you learn how not to do it, not to act like your character so you wouldn't get into trouble. Every script that we read teaches us a lot in every which way. Somebody has written this story, and this story has some signs from the truth that took place at certain times. Now they've all come together, turned into a story. I learned a lot. I've learned a lot from Abasarala. Last year, when she started in season 4, when she started doing micromanagement, noticing that people, who were working for her were not doing the right job, she started doing the micromanagement. I remember it was at the beginning of the season. I thought, wow, she's right. She is right. There have been a couple of mistakes by my people whom we work together. And from now on, doesn't matter who's who, how important they are. I really have to look over their jobs and make sure that they've done their jobs right. Micromanagement.
It's I'm only laughing because it's my biggest flaw. I think I do too much of it. So now you're saying do more of it. I'm for you. I'm with you. That's fantastic.
Honestly, bravo, because I wasn't doing it. I was relying on my people. But when she started, I started too. And I must tell you that I'm very happy with this decision.
That's brilliant.
Fantastic. Well, I mean, I wondered, jumping back, your aspiration to build schools in Iran and Jordan, and so on. I mean, it's really interesting because I mean, I think it's so important. Activism. Trying to leave the world better than you found it in that way. I mean, I guess that's interesting because that lies outside any kind of career ambition. I mean, do you think it's the responsibility of people with profile to take up causes that are meaningful to them?
Well, it's supposed to be a part of the humanity, thinking about other people who are not as privileged as you are. But well, it's really one needs to be trained. First off, I was 5 years old when, for the first time, I was taken to a slum area with my grandmother. She used to take me first to the bazaar, buy stuff, rice, chocolate, uh, chicken, meat, stuff that the two of us could carry. And then she would get a cab. We would go to the slum area, and we would give this to the people in the slum area. Every time in the cab going back home, she kept telling me, while caressing, "Shohreh dear, life without service is not a life. Life without service is not a life." So I've been trained that way. But for people who've not been trained that way, the easiest thing and the best thing we can tell them is that the world is relative. If you do not help others who are not privileged or sort of underprivileged, if you don't help them to get themselves educated and get a job or get somewhere in life or become somebody in life, one day the two of you are going to meet. And I'm very afraid of that day.
Mm. It's fascinating you say this, and Alex, you mentioned it too. You recall we had conversation with Dominique actually last year when she was in our live show in London. The various members of the cast of The Expanse were looking to work on educational outreach projects, and I know that they several of you did go. I wasn't sure if you were part of it, but they went and did it in New York, where Stephen's from. And we've been talking about Dominique in working with Space Rocks and The Expanse in doing something in London, where she's from, of course. So I think we all have a responsibility in what we're doing as well to think about that bigger picture. I mean, I think, in the space community, we all often become very self-absorbed about what we do. That I have a hammer called space and it's going to solve every problem. Well, actually, sometimes you need a completely different hammer. Take yourself out of your world, use a profile, use the skills you have, but go somewhere else. So I think that's lovely to hear that. That is something which you learned when you were very young, because for some of us it comes later, I'm afraid. It takes a lifetime of seeing inequality before we suddenly think, like, maybe I need to do something here.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Well, deep thoughts, and certainly, I guess the mission for Space Rocks is very much to provoke these kinds of thoughts, and I think to bring these worlds together. Because although a lot of our dreams occur in outer space, certainly um, so much of space is about what's happening down here, and the kind of ideas that you've helped us to explore through your portrayal in The Expanse and other roles have really enriched our world. And I think on behalf of everyone who has watched tonight, everyone at Space Rocks, I just have to say an enormous heartfelt thank you for being such a gracious guest, and for helping us illuminate so many important questions that need answering. So thank you very much indeed.
Yeah.
You for being such amazing hosts.
Thank you. For us, of course, hopefully when this is all over and done with, we'll be able to meet again in person, and anytime you're in Europe, we'd love you, have you part of the Space Rocks family, which you are already. And indeed, the way we seal the deal on being part of the Space Rocks family is we have to learn the Space Rocks hand sign. Now, you've been in Star Trek, so you must be able to do this already. This is the Vulcan salute. Exactly. So live long and prosper from Mr. Spock. It's difficult. And then the other one is a little bit easier. That's the horns of rocks. Those space rocks. Thank you very much, Shohreh. It's been an enormous pleasure having you on this evening.
Thank you so much. An honor. Merci. Thank you so much for having me.
May we cross paths again. Be well. Thank you so much once again.
Looking forward to see you next year.
Yeah, absolutely. Be well. Thank you.
Merci.
Well, Mark, I got to be honest. This happens a lot on Uplink, but I would have gladly just listened to that all night. That was just
what a fantastic person. I mean, as I said, we had the privilege of meeting just very briefly last year at FedCon in Germany. But when you talk to her, as we just have had, and hopefully everybody got this as well, she is as open and as honest, well, I don't know, I'm lost for words, and that doesn't happen very often, so I'll just shut up there, because everybody will think, what is he talking about?
A dynamo both on and off the screen.
Absolutely.
I think a pretty good summation. So I just want to say thank you to everyone who's joined us tonight. Obviously, huge thanks to Shohreh. Follow us online, sign up to our newsletter at spacerocksofficial.com, and we have some pretty cool plans coming up, don't we?
We do indeed, yes. Nothing absolutely in the schedule yet, but there's plenty more to come. We've got lots of very interesting people that we will bring to you soon enough. And since we're all about to head back into lockdown, hey, you've got nothing else to do anyway, right?
Indeed. Oh, ever the optimist. But
I'm sorry.
No, not at all. It is absolutely appropriate. But man, what a moment. So thanks so much to everyone for joining, and Mark, we'll catch you very soon indeed. Okay.
See you soon.
See you guys.